churches and mission effectiveness. Our guest is Antony Barraclough. There's a new move to multi-campus churches within the traditional denomination, with a growing argument that this is a potentially better way to mission effectiveness. Traditionally, churches have merged when at least one of the churches had declined to a point when it wasn't financially viable. Amalgamations were seen as reactive to deal with decline and non-viability. However, there's a proposed reconfiguration going on, not driven by a reaction to decline in numbers and poor management. Rather quietly, under our feet, there's a different approach emerging to doing church, shifting from one campus to multi-campuses. Some are saying it's a better way to be mission effective, to reach people, to see them saved. Antony Barraclough is with me. Antony's an old friend, the senior minister of what is now called North Light Anglican Church on Sydney's North Shore. That was St Matthew's West Pymble and All Saints West Linfield. Antony, share your pastor's heart. I mean, how did the conversation start? What were the mission drivers that led to the two churches coming together?
Thanks for raising the topic and thanks for having me here. Actually, the conversation started with the former rector at West Linfield, Phil Reid. He approached me and said, would you like to chat about how we can help each other and particularly how you can help us? And I thought that was an extraordinary thing. And if you know that fellow, what drives him is Christ and seeing others won by the gospel. And he wanted help with that, and that was, if you like, the first premise of the conversation. And so we discussed it from we praying for them as a church right through to what we did do, which is a merger and a partnership together. And so that's what interests me as well, to see more people come under the sound of the gospel, to have a compelling experience of church whilst they're at that, and to see people grow in faith. And that's got to be the reason behind all of this, and that's part of his DNA, part of my DNA, and it's how, if you like, this merger ended up happening between our parishes.
Take us to that conversation in the coffee shop between you and Phil, and the different options you wrote on the napkin as you talked.
Yeah, well, he wrote them down. He said, well, it could start with you praying for us, which not enough parishes do, actually, praying for their neighbouring parish. So you could do that. It could be perhaps supporting them with a mission of some kind, a week here or there, or some. I forget the different options all the way along that scale, but it ended up with we could partner together for a little while and potentially merge. But it was very much a partnership where the model looked like we would form one ministry team, one governance team, and in effect, well, we didn't start off with one parish, that came as a secondary step, but basically working together where he said he'd come and work under my leadership. And that is an extraordinary thing. And part of the core to the success of the conversation and the fruits that have come, if he weren't humble enough to do that, we'd be in a different space, I think. So in large part, it comes out of his humility and mission drive to lead the conversation in the direction it has.
I mean, keep going on that conversation. You say, oh, why don't we talk about this one? And then what was the next thing?
Well, so we've been praying for other churches, and so that's great. We believe in the power of prayer, but it hasn't changed a lot of churches that needed the help in the past. So we said, well, if we're to do this, then from our end, if we were to try and get people to go to All Saints West Linfield, which was part of that vision to transplant people over, then they'd need to trust the leadership now. Not that he wasn't trustworthy, but they didn't know him. And so we needed to be able to share the DNA across the platforms, across the two sites, and help our people say, we are helping this church by, if you like, working together in a leadership structure you can trust. With Phil, he was on the team for a period. He's now left to go to be the rector of Penshurst. And that really helped our people say, all right, this is not just send some people bye-bye, God bless you. This is us working with that church in unity, with a common team and common governance, common budget, all those kinds of things.
When you guys walked out of the coffee shop and started to talk to other people, how did the different conversations go?
Yes, so, I mean, there's scepticism.
Yeah.
Why do this? And
I imagine there'd be scepticism
Both ends.
Both churches.
Yeah, that's right, both ends. So at the Linfield end,
help us?
it was, why do they want to do this? From the cynical, gosh, they must just want our property to sell it to do plans at their end. You know, that's because they didn't know us, and so you fill in the gaps. That wasn't our plan. So you can come up with all sorts of things like that. At our end, at the St Matt's end, where I was originally, it was, this is just going to burn you out. And why do we want to do this?
Why take on another?
Yeah. I loved it that was the concern of the people, and you know, I was up for that, and I am working harder than I have before, or it is harder work perhaps, and I love that concern. In the end, the language I used to sell it, or we used to sell it, Phil with his church, me with our church, was the language of momentum. We were a church that had some ministry momentum. Evening service was full to the brim, well over the 80% thing. We were filling up those chairs. And part of what went through my mind was, gosh, I don't want to turn up on the judgment day and say we had a full church and didn't try to reach others.
Do the next thing.
So I wanted this approach by Phil allowed us to potentially transplant people, start another service, which we did over at West Linfield, and refill, because the momentum we had in our 6 p.m. service was strong and good. It only took 2 weeks to refill those seats of the people that we sent out. So the demand was there, or the capacity was there, or the momentum we had was there. COVID then came along, and that's a different story. And with that, we tried to start a new service over at West Linfield from those people that left. So we had the momentum, they needed momentum. Could we share that momentum? And I went with this analogy in the, I guess, the sales pitch of it with the two churches.
Now, that's interesting. Momentum's an interesting word. And just kind of contrast that momentum discussion with, I mean, in the past, people would have only considered mergers when I was so desperate as a church, I was on life support, you know, and so I had no other option, complete back to the wall. But this wasn't that situation. No. It was, we want to do this better to glorify Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. We had that capacity. We wanted to do that, share that momentum with others, because in the end, you know, the West Linfield Church wasn't full each weekend, and it's still not full, but that is the goal. And if we can help with that, praise be to God. That's got to be the goal. Yeah, so that momentum was our language for that. It was, if you like, neutral language. It wasn't judgmental language, and it helped us sell it, I think.
As you've reflected back, and I'm imagining you think, oh, we've been down this journey. Is this a helpful journey for others to go on? And why or why not might somebody else go down that journey?
Yeah, look, I think it's really worth considering. Every church needs to work out afresh in each generation, how is it going to mission its area? So everyone needs something to upset the apple cart to go fresh thinking, what can we do? So the thing that's different between us and others who are doing it around the diocese is others are doing it when one of the parishes is vacant. And so it's, if you like, an arrangement of the churches during that interregnum to do that. We didn't have that. And so there's a little difference there. And so the conversations are slightly different in the process. But if mission isn't driving it, how can we be more effective? I think, you know, that's got to be the driver. So I think that's one of the big lessons.
Now, here we are, a couple of years later. What's the vibe amongst the membership? Tell us about the membership at West Linfield. Are they thinking, oh, well, that didn't turn out to be that good, or are they thinking that was a positive?
Well, look, there's been some good things happening and some hard things happening for that membership. If you like, the original core who were faithful, evangelical, who paid for the building and built it, or their parents did, they're struggling because it's changed and they're no longer independent, and that's a hard thing for them. I closed the 8:30 service. It was down to the last 8 people. That's a heart grief for them. And the service that we have for them, the more contemporary 10 o'clock, is not their sort of thing. I get that. That's really hard. And
there's only 8 people.
That's right.
Right, okay.
In that service. And then the 10 o'clock service, which had a number from that, if you like, the original guard, if that's what you want to call it, and some others, I think they're loving the refreshment that is coming from this momentum, because they were on 3 or 4 rosters a Sunday, each of them, and they were tired, they were exhausted. Where's the hope? And our partnership, we actually started with a partnership rather than a merger, and our partnership, when we sold it, we ended up with 5 couples, 10 people, leave our St Matt's 10 o'clock service and go to the All Saints 10 o'clock service. Just 10 people. And the reception at the Linfield end was, oh, this is great. More people to help. The building is so full. And our perspective was, full, what do you mean? It's just 10 people. So the psychology of the 2 different experiences was very different. And sending those 10 was just tremendous. And they, from the St Matt's end, they have, if you like, been the trailblazers, and others have gone after them.
10 people with children or without?
No, they were actually older than that.
Right.
Some have children that are in another service, so not Sunday school children. That's where we need to grow. But these are people who have been at St Matt's a long time. They saw the vision of this. They said,
we can help.
We can help. And I think also they wanted just to go to a little bit of a smaller church, and so there was a few little side benefits for them.
Okay, talk to me about the staff and, if you like, how do you as a leader, and how do you ensure the staff aren't just thinking of, well, this is the main game here and that just gets second class over there? How do you think as a whole?
Well, I think we had to deliberately do that, and it took a few months in staff meetings. Yes, but what about the other one? The other campus? We had to say, how does this impact over there? But also in our case, we had Phil Reid join our staff teams. And so he's a shy person by nature, but he needed to say and was saying, well, what about at our end? And so that taught us and trained us, and now our whole staff agenda, as we run through things, we say, well, here, there, what does that look like here? What does it look like there? And, we've had to... The change has been enormous. We've had to change the way we present our bulletins. We've had to change the way we do rosters. We've had to change. So once we started working that through, the domino effect gets you out of that, they're the baby or the satellite campus or something like that.
I was talking to Andrew West, who was a student minister here, but now is on the staff at Church by the Bridge, and they've gone through a similar kind of exercise with Neutral Bay and that kind of thing. He was telling me that Paul Dale had put him on as campus or as congregation pastor for one service at Neutral Bay and a different service over at Kirribilli, and so that he wasn't doing 2 services on one site. He was doing one service on one site and one service on one of their other sites. And that had been helpful, I think, in terms of him not thinking of siloed. Is that...
Yes, ours is arranged slightly differently. We basically have one pastor per congregation. That's their main responsibility. And so they could be siloed. And we try to mix up the preaching, particularly with myself. I need to be on both campuses, the service leading as well. But
how's that working for you? What percentage are you preaching in the different places? And...
Oh, you always feel like it's not enough, but I think I'd be preaching... We've just done it... In our first year, we did it such that the sermon would be preached one week on one campus and repeated the next week on the other campus. And so we did that deliberately. So
Who went first?
West Pymble went first.
Right, okay.
Linfield got the repeat, but we did it that way so that every preacher would end up on the other campus. And we did that for about 18 months. And that allowed us to meet them and them to meet us, the leadership team. Also, we met Phil in the pulpit at West Pymble that way. And that worked really well. We've just switched to parallel preaching, the same passage, both sites. So that means 2 preachers, which ups the amount of preaching that we each get to do.
How do you, as I reflect on what I do and I reflect on what other senior ministers do, you end up giving yourself the really complex passages, the ones, whether it's the gender one or
the vision type ones.
Or the vision type ones. The ones, but the ones that are really going to, if you like, they're going to be difficult and complex. I remember somebody saying to me, I owe it to the congregation that they know what I think and they hear it from me in my voice. Now, so But if you're going parallel preaching like that, you can't do that.
That'll be a difficulty, yes, although we only have one service that's on at the same time between the two, and that's our 10 a.m s. And there have been times, lockdown mucked it around, but we were thinking we needed to do a vision series. We were going to do a Thanksgiving and then the next week a vision. And the way we're going to do the Thanksgiving originally was online and the vision in person because of the timing of the weeks. And we were going to put me on early in one service and late in the other service.
Zip across the road.
Zip across the road. So
did you do that?
No, because lockdown was still going, and so we ended up. I ended up preaching online.
Right.
But I think that's how we'll handle it in the future. It means you can't do questions and so forth on those particular ones. The other thing we did for our vision, which is the most recent example, was we actually had a combined service, a Thanksgiving vision. We had a combined service where every element, a bit like a Lessons and Carols, you had a song and a reading and an explanation of that word from each of the services, and we put that together as one of the services, as a whole service, and that was a wonderfully unifying moment. And so just a little bit of creativeness whilst we're in lockdown and online, that was great.
Has it grown, the gospel? I mean, there's the bottom line. Has it worked?
Lockdown has mucked us up and we're still coming back from that. But I think on the whole we'd say yes. So St Matt's has refilled the seats that it lost, and we've had staff change, and that leads to other things. So that's been great. And Linfield, my first Sunday there, in the building there were 22 people at the 10 o'clock service. Well, I preached there 2 or 3 days ago, 66 or something. So praise God.
Well, that's up.
Yeah, that is up. There's transfer within all of that, mostly transfer, but there are people starting to come, and we're so thankful. We celebrated a story the other day of a lady who came to our play group, we call it Minis, at West Pymble, but lives in Linfield, ended up going to church there. And we just thought, this is just sensational. The two churches working together, one had a ministry, we're about to launch a play group at the Linfield end next year, but it cross-fed, and she was up in front of everyone saying thank you for that. And it was such an inspiring story.
Now, one of your church plant was at 4 p.m. Now 4:30 p.m. And was that aimed at young adults, or was that aimed at families? Or
so originally it was aimed at the young worker type demographic, which is the missing demographic. We thought we'd have a go at that. It started. We planted it March last year. First week, major thunderstorms. Roads flooded. We had to cancel last minute on its launch day, and then it met for 3 Sundays, and then the first lockdown happened. So it's had a very rough start, and it's been 2 years, but it's been 6 months of meeting. If you know what I mean. So we're having to think about that, working out what we can do with that service again. But of all the church plants I've seen, it's had the roughest start.
That's interesting. I mean, I was asking Rich Wendon about that 4 o'clock time slot. What's your thinking about that time slot?
What we wanted to do was try and pick a time slot where you could socialise and have pizzas or dinner afterwards, and not be rushed with that, and still be able to get home to do, whatever chores you had for the rest of the day and all of that kind of reasoning. So I'm not sure. It may be a fraction early, but it works for those who are there. Does it work for the community and drawing them in? I'll watch that question.
Right. Okay. What do you wish you'd done differently? Can't be vulnerable. It's just us.
Look, I think it's just us. I think it was a harder thing for me than I had anticipated. Now, people had warned me, and I was up for it because driven by, I think, good motives, but it's far more complex, and there's no way I'd do a church plant like this or a merger like this with a COVID pandemic at the same time. So avoid that in future. So they were two very big things, and I was extremely tired, especially last year, because of those two how do you handle church in a pandemic? But how do you handle a merger and caring for people you don't quite know and all of that? So I think it's been proved to be far more work than I anticipated. I would have liked to have read more from perhaps some of the American experience. There are not a lot of Sydney Anglican experiences out there yet. I think it'd be great to get a little cohort of people who are doing it together to say, how does this work? And yet, there have been mergers of churches, for a long, long time, but not quite in this way, in this model. So more research, I guess, would have helped, and more patience.
Patience?
Could always be more. Well, because you want to see things go, and then, as I say, the pandemic interfered with things, and so you're sidetracked. And I'd like to be further ahead than where we are for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So is it 2 years, or is it like the equivalent 6, 8, 9 months? Mm-hmm. So you've just got to be patient within to see God do His work through these people. And yet the trajectory is quite good. I'm full of joy as to what's happening, and God willing, He'll keep blessing it.
The change in leadership of church, the report that we're linking to in the show notes, which I think hopelessly calls this hub and spoke rather than campus mergers or multi-campus mission-driven. But that report does highlight the change in church leadership and the change in churches from voluntary association to the really complex thing of effectively running a small business today.
It is exponentially more difficult because rosters are more difficult. Where do I deploy my staff? Especially when you've got competing time slots.
How do you work that out? Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, because even if they weren't competing time slots, there's 5 services on 2 sites. That would exhaust the average person.
You can't go to them all.
You can't go to them all.
So where do you put your resources?
Yeah, so we're structured with a main minister for each service, so they're there. And when they're preaching, they're usually preaching along each site. We do site-based preaching at the moment, rather than some sort of zigzag, if you like, of approach.
How much are you at each site?
Right, so I see myself as different. I don't have any congregational responsibility, direct congregational responsibility, so I see myself as the overseer of the whole thing. And so I want to be present at many places, every place. Over 2 or 3 weeks, I'd like to have touched every surface. That's my hope.
So when you do your preaching program, you're trying to put yourself on...
I'd probably have 1 week off a month, 1.5 on average weeks off a month off preaching, which is fine, which is good.
Back to the staff. So how does it work?
Well, so they're deployed congregationally. Myself in that oversight floating sense. We have a women's minister, Natalie Ray, who also does the same, but it's been very hard on her as well. It's very hard actually to do that many services. So we've set ourselves the next 6 months to rethink what is North Light. As we come out of pandemic, we can, well, God willing, we can turn our attention to a deeper level thinking on that. And so one of those things will be staffing. Where do we deploy them, how, in a way that is sustainable and doesn't burn them out? But you see, one of the things that was attractive to Linfield was that they'd get a senior minister plus some other assistant ministers, a dedicated kids and youth minister and a women's minister. So that's what we brought to that team, but we didn't think through...
And drivers to do Christmas services and all those kind of things.
A whole heap.
Yeah.
Didn't think deeply enough about, well, what would the cost be on the team? Right. And so she's the one I think has paid for it most this year. And so that we've got to address that.
I'm imagining, I'm sure there's going to be staff teams watching this, and there'll be leadership teams from, if you like, potential hub churches, leadership teams from potential, spoke churches. I don't like that language, but what would your words be to those leadership teams that are going to be watching, interacting with this discussion?
Well, yes. I'm not sure I'm the wise one, but I think be clear.
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Well, if you're giving me one eye. Look, I think, remember the purpose. It's mission that's driving it. It's not, it can look impressive or whatever. You've got to remove those kinds of motives, or more space, or more, you've got, it's mission. Mm-hmm. When you merge in this way, you are investing in a second geographic place for the sake of Christ, and that takes as much effort as it took to do it in one place. Mm-hmm. And so that's a hard thing. So consider that work. And I think the next thing I'd say is everyone has got to be humble, and I think the teams have got to be humble. You don't want to come across as, especially if it's a church with momentum, merging with one with less momentum, you don't want to come across as arrogant or boastful or we know how, move aside, we'll show you. That's just not my nature anyway, so we've tried not to communicate that. And I think if you did, that would backfire on people. So I think humility is key. But then we knew this with leadership, but even more so on this issue. And then I think ask lots of questions. The thing that we were also really concerned about at the beginning was to communicate ad nauseum. We had lots of meetings and forums to ask questions. Frequently ask questions type pages. We did as much as we could have done more. Could have done more.
Last question, because somebody will just ask the technical questions. How did it work in terms of in the denominational structure? Did you become the senior minister of both, rights of nomination, all those kind of technical
So we did it in two steps. We partnered initially, two churches working together as two structurally separate parishes with separate governance.
You were going to parish council twice a month?
I was going to parish council twice a month. I'll tell you how we did that in a second. But I was the senior minister of both. So there's a way in the Anglican system where you can be the locum of one and the rector of another. And so I was the rector of West Pymble and the locum minister of the other. And so, and then Phil came and joined the team under that. So that's how we worked there. Governance-wise, we had two parish councils with two budgets, but they talked. Mm-hmm. So we had parish council on the same night. The first hour was one of the parishes, then there was a common hour, and then it was the other parish. So I had a 3-hour parish council, and then parish council was shrunk down to 1 hour for each parish with a common hour. At the start, most of our work was done in the 2 individual hours. At the end of the 18 months that we did that partnership, most of the work was done in the common hour.
Right. Okay.
And then we did the same for the wardens' meetings.
Excellent. There's a whole nother discussion to have about that.
That's supposed to be the last question.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming in. It's been really good to learn from your wisdom, and you've got me thinking. Great. This has been The Pastor's Heart. Antony Barraclough has been my guest. He is the senior pastor of North Light Anglican Church on the North Shore of Sydney, and talking mission growth and how merging churches might facilitate that. You've been with us on The Pastor's Heart. Look forward to your company next Tuesday.